Finally, after so much speculation, we're actually starting to get some leaks and rumors about the next generation HomePod 2 or HomePod Mini or whatever they're going to be calling it. Maybe a more budget-friendly version with Beats branding? Why? Oh. Actually, a lot of people have been asking me, like, Drew, why don't you upload a HomePod review? After talking so much about the HomePod all those days in a row way back when it came out, I was like, wait, I guess I never really flat out released a review. I compared it to other things and I defended it, and I just kind of figured that everything I needed to say about the HomePod I said in those couple videos. So a review felt redundant at that point, but all in all, it's a really great sounding speaker that has very controversial connectivity issues. And for me, I can completely understand why you wouldn't want to buy a HomePod because it can't pair via Bluetooth. I get that. There's plenty of instances in which I've wanted to be able to do that and I can't because it's the Apple Music device and that's all you can use it for. But on top of that, a lot of people who buy it and who do already have Apple Music seem to enjoy it. It's a very great sounding speaker, and if you already have Apple Music and if you already have an Apple supporting ecosystem, it works great for you. If you do not have an Apple supporting ecosystem, yeah, don't buy the HomePod. It's a bad idea. Not exactly like AirPods, which you can even recommend to a lot of people who have Android phones. Plenty of people I know have Android phones and say, yeah, I pair them with AirPods and it's great. Yeah, it's not the same situation here with the HomePod. If you don't have an iPhone, iMac, Apple TV, and all HomeKit supported smart devices, probably don't go with the HomePod. We know that earlier this year, Ming Chi was predicting that we would get a lower priced HomePod of some sorts, and his estimation was between $150 and $200, which, you know, when we hear all the complaints about the HomePod costing too much, we're still kind of like, I mean, that budget price is better, but is that really going to fix the situation? If you could really even call it a situation. It's a brand new product line for Apple. Apple's already outselling everyone else in every other category. The fact that the HomePod's not selling well to the rest of the competition, is that really going to affect them? It's probably not a big priority, but we do know now that HomePods, despite being one of the most expensive smart speakers on the market, already accompany 6% of the market. And yeah, I get it. That's a small percentage of the market, but I'd be very curious to know how much of the smart speaker market the Google Home Max takes up, because obviously buying one HomePod is still more expensive than buying like 5 to 6 Google Home Minis. So it makes sense that the majority of the market is probably going to be Amazon Echoes and Google Homes, not the HomePod, and I don't think it's a shocker that it's not flooding the market. But definitely, I think a persuasive point would be to lower this price, and this is when the Beats marketing rumor confuses me. What's the advantage to suddenly now making a smart speaker that's Beats powered? I'm guessing it still works with Siri. It's just lower price now, likely going to be a little bit smaller, but still sound decent enough, because I think the difficult balance Apple is having with developing the next generation of HomePod is Apple's all about premium. They don't want to make a product that's undercooked like the Home Mini is, with sound quality being an afterthought and the smartness of it being the priority. I think Apple wants to prioritize the sound quality, and when they do that, they can't really make it affordable. But no one's really gonna buy it unless it's affordable, so it's this very delicate balance I'm sure they're having a very hard time to find. And perhaps branding it with Beats is kind of their way of saying, well, this is cheaper, but, you know, we didn't actually design it, Beats designed it. So if the sound doesn't sound as good, blame Beats, not us. It's kind of a rude way of doing it when you think about it. It's like, oh, you don't like it? Blame them. But Apple, you bought them. You own that company. Yeah, but they made it, so don't get mad at us. Kind of in a similar situation where the Beats X headphones was like, well, if you don't like AirPods and you want a longer battery life and you want a wire connecting them in between, buy the Beats X. Not to mention, just a tiny bit cheaper. Even though Apple probably truly wants you to use AirPods, Beats is kind of the fallback plan. You want over-ear headphones? Go with the Beats Solos, because we're not making those yet. Though. I'm hoping still we can get Apple Pro Pods, but we'll see. Perhaps a smaller, lower-priced Beats Apple speaker that has Siri built into it, that controls your HomeKit, pairs with the W1 chip, does all that, but for a more affordable price, maybe that will be a bit more appealing to the market, because while it is a Siri-powered speaker, having that Beats branding maybe will be Apple's excuse for it not sounding as amazing as a HomePod does, because people who've listened to the HomePod can admit that it doesn't peak out any volume. It sounds great, especially if you have an iMac with iTunes. You can pair them both together and get them both playing the same music. It sounds awesome. But maybe some people don't need something that fills the room and they just want something that controls your HomeKit devices. Perhaps a $150 to $200 smart speaker from Apple or Beats is the best we can actually get, because Apple does not want to put their name on something that's like $100 or $50 that sounds like a Google Home Mini because everyone will be like, well, that sounds terrible. I think Apple's very confused with this lineup from the get-go. I mean, the HomePod still only just came out this year, even though it was unveiled at WWDC last year. They're still kind of experimenting with how they want to run things because for some reason, they decided to make a product that was prioritizing the Apple Music service and not so much the revenue of that particular product. That's why you can't pair it via Bluetooth. Even though Bluetooth technology exists in the HomePod, it's still not an option there. Perhaps they might get a bit more lenient if you go the route of the Beats HomePod budget option, because maybe Apple will say, well, you know, the sound quality's not as good. Doesn't sound as good as a HomePod, but if you want to pair it with Bluetooth and stuff like that, I guess you can go with the Beats option. Beats Pod, Home Beats Pod, I don't know. But I think incorporating it with that different branding is Apple's way of saying we don't want to do it that way, but we'll at least provide an option that does it in the stores if you want it to work that way. That way, HomePod can be for more premium Apple ecosystem users that want a really, truly great sounding experience, but if you want just an okay sounding speaker that connects via Bluetooth, can work with Android and Spotify and stuff like that, but also has Siri built in and can control your HomeKit devices, perhaps go for the cheaper $150 to $200 Beats HomePod. I'm not saying that's what I want to happen. Personally, I would prefer it if Apple just went ahead and said, you know what, let's not worry about sound quality on one of these speakers. Let's just make something that's good at being a Siri voice assistant. Or if someone wants a smart hub to control their HomeKit devices from, but they don't have an Apple TV or an iPad to stay at home, I really think it's possible for Apple to make a fairly decent sounding speaker for $99, maybe $150, that just does the essential sound quality, doesn't overblow or overpeak anything, but also has, of course, Siri built in and can do all the HomeKit features. I think that should be possible. I know Apple, when they're designing these smart speakers, really wants to prioritize how they sound, maybe because they know that Siri, in regards to other digital assistants, needs to catch up. They know that their primary feature of their new speakers cannot be the digital assistant because it'll get smoked by the Google Assistant. So, for one, let's hope they just make Siri smarter at WWDC. First of all, Siri needs to be a lot better. There's no denying that. But second of all, for the sake of price, Apple, you really could make a cheaper one that sounds pretty good, but does all of those Siri HomeKit features. I don't think that's too much to ask. I think it's completely doable, and I've really been enjoying my 3 HomePods. We got 2 on the desk that are paired to my iMac, and then we got 1 on the Apple TV right over here, and basically everything we watch between Netflix, YouTube, Hulu, everything is powered through that HomePod, and it sounds amazing. So in terms of sound quality, which that's what speakers are, they have been top-notch, which, the joke, there you go. And in terms of smartness, Siri definitely needs improvement, but for the most amount of stuff I need Siri to do, she can do just fine. I ask her to play music or send a text message or set a timer. I know there's plenty of things the Google Assistant can do that Siri can't. I'm aware of all those things, but those can get better with time. Those can get better with updates, which Apple is very consistent about. Whereas speaker sound quality, that's something you cannot change down the road. As smart as the Google Assistant gets, your Google Home Mini is going to sound like pretty hot garbage for as long as it's supported. So please, let me know what your thoughts are on the next generation HomePod. What price point do you think Apple should aim for? And what features does Siri absolutely need to prioritize? Let me know in the comments below. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.